Well, accorded an gédal sias tó firkin fóilse rud go léir go dtí Áras an Uachtaráin agus is mór an pleasure dom héin firkin fóilse Áras is mín le ma weakas a ghála or stúr or faimacán brod and Gembro Kame Fumuk. I must pronounce it correctly. Gembrone? Yes, is that good enough? Okay. I'm just going to meet them out for the letter a hewla to them. It's my very great pleasure to welcome you all to Áras an Uachtaráin. And as I said, I just want to thank your executive director for contacting me and suggesting that we celebrate together the 10th anniversary of Transgender Equality Network Ireland. And I'm delighted to have this occasion to meet you and to acknowledge the crucial support that your organisation has been providing to Ireland's transgender people and their families since your foundation in 2006. I'm really delighted that my friend Michael Farrell, for his letter in which he commended the work of the Transgender Equality Network. Michael, a member of the Council of State, has played such an important role in advocating for human rights in this island over the years that it comes as no surprise to me that he lent his expertise as a solicitor to the cause of transgender equality. We go back a very long, long time. And I'm delighted that he's here. Your visit today provides us with a welcome opportunity, and I've been thinking about this because recently I was addressing somewhat similar themes. It gives us an opportunity to look back and take stock of the significant, but of course overdue and painfully slow, advances that have recently been secured in our countries to the fundamental right of our lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender and intersex citizens to live equal, dignified and fulfilling lives. Now, the atmosphere that served as source to such opposition as you have had to face, the delays or the lethargy, was, I want to suggest, a particular earlier 20th century phenomenon rather than any essential aspect of republicanism in its best sense, or indeed a product of the literary work of the revival movement that I have been referring to during this year of commemoration. Transgender society people experience what it is to live deprived of full rights in the shadows of society, stigmatized and mistreated very often. And over the past months, we've seen two significant steps on the journey towards equality. Steps which were secured thanks to the watchful, determined and creative activism and tenacity of those such as Transgender Equality Network. And these two I refer to, of course, are the Marriage Act 2015 and the Gender Recognition Act of 2015. The second is hugely significant in that it enables transgender people to achieve full legal recognition of their preferred gender identity and acquire a new birth certificate that reflects that identity. And as all of you here know very well, birth certificates are foundational documents that have not just great symbolic value for the identity and integrity of the self, but also significant practical importance. Indeed, birth certificates are customarily requested for such important matters in the life of any citizen as is accessing social welfare, obtaining a PPS number, or indeed applying for a passport. And since the passing of the legislation, 149 new certificates have been granted, and 4 of those were to applicants under 18 years of age. This afternoon, I would like to acknowledge and pay tribute to all those who campaigned for such life-changing legislation. The effective and sustained advocacy carried out by Transgender Equality Network Ireland across Ireland's legal, political, but also medical structures has been instrumental in ensuring that both policy and legislative enactments can foster a positive recognition of the rights to inclusion and equality of transgender people in our republic. As I was preparing my notes as well, it occurred to me about what you might call also some of the inequalities in equality advocacy, is that there were lonely times for those who have making particular claims to establish equality. And it is worthy, though, to recall that support was received in the advocacy that was successful from both opposition and backbench legislators, who frequently raised the issue in the Oireachtas, introduced private members' bills on occasion, and advocated on behalf of Ireland's transgender community. A crucial role, one that must never be forgotten in the history of campaigns for equality, is, I believe, that which was played by such unyielding campaigners as Claire Farrell and Lydia Foy, both of whom I'm so glad with us here this afternoon. Dr. Lydia Foy's long-running action against the Irish state, in a bid to have her female identity recognised on her birth certificate, lasted for 20 years. Indeed, it was in 1993 that Lydia first wrote to the Irish Registrar seeking a new birth certificate reflecting her gender identity. Hers was a long journey, requiring much more than patience, and the support of the Council of Europe's Commissioner for Human Rights, Nils Muizhnieks, was brought to bear in 2012, and in January 2013, Lydia Foy began her third and last set of legal proceedings against the Irish state, which eventually led to what Michael Fowle, who represented her throughout her lengthy legal struggle, referred to as the welcome, if overdue, positive conclusion to her, let me say it slowly, 17 years of litigation. May I mention that the Commissioner is going to visit me tomorrow morning here in the Áras, and I very much look forward to discussing with him the new landscape of LGBTI rights in our country. While an adequate legislative framework protecting the rights of our lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender and intersex citizens is the necessary infrastructure for any enduring social progress, we must, I believe, go further and seek to craft together such a public discourse as will enable us to effectively eliminate all forms of discrimination in our society, be they based on gender identity, sexual orientation, religious beliefs, cultural history, physical appearance, or mental abilities. That is what is required to achieve full participation on equal terms. And we might reflect on the fact that labelling has usually served the projects of exclusion and their rationalisations so very much more than they've assisted egalitarian tendencies and advocacy or anything emancipatory. And what I have to say now very much is influenced by my own consideration as a sociologist over very, very many years. I know that all of us may be committed to a vision of an Ireland where transgender people are understood, accepted and respected. An Ireland where every citizen can lead happy and fulfilling lives without being excluded from employment or from adequate healthcare services, and without being stigmatised or marginalised or ever subjected to harassment and violence for the persons who they are. But that is far short still of the full participation, it seems to me, that is required and for which a change in consciousness is required. In achieving such a vision of a fair, inclusive and equal Ireland, we might draw inspiration from the emancipatory vision which animated so many of the revolutionary men and women from our past. These year's commemorations of the centenary of the Eastern Rising of 1916 have been such an important occasion for Irish people to rediscover previously neglected aspects of the writings and work of those who participated in Ireland's revolution. For example, the women, and indeed in their writings, of the decades preceding the Rising. 50 years ago, the commemorations were heavily militarily and were quite interesting in those that they excluded practically everybody except who were a male participant in the military struggle. And the new atmosphere at the island of 2016 and what we've been having, a more inclusive practice of commemoration, has enabled us to discuss more freely the fact that, for example, a significant number of the women and men who led to the Irish Revolution were not just radical in their political outlook, they were also people who made quite radical choices about their personal lives, behaviour and actions, and they respected such choices by others. This is particularly true of the women of 1916. Margaret Skinner, for example, who fought with the St. Stephen's Green garrison, was, by her own account, an adept of cross-dressing, and she enjoyed drilling with the Irish volunteers without her male comrades ever noticing that she was a woman. We can think too of Dr. Kathleen Lynn, who was an officer of the Irish Citizen Army during the Rising and who shared a prison cell with her lifelong partner Madeleine French Mullen after the surrender. The two of them lived and worked together for decades afterwards. But neither should we forget that Elizabeth O'Farrell, the nurse who famously brought the order to surrender to the rebel garrisons across Dublin, is buried with her life partner Judith Lennon in Glasnevin Cemetery. Thus, notwithstanding the traditional gender roles ascribed to them in the Ireland of the time, many women, especially those who were members of James Connolly's Irish Citizen Army, did play a prominent combatant role during the Easter Rebellion. It is one of Connolly's distinctions that he included all of these in the full sense of the struggle that was underway. But also they chose to follow in their private and public lives paths that were then highly unconventional according to the norms of the time. I have two things to say about it. One is rather obvious and the other is necessarily subtle but important. In a recent lecture I delivered at Congress Hall in London, building on the work of Dr. Sonia Tiernan, I was seeking to redress the neglect of the life and achievements of Eva Gore Booth, Constant Markovic's younger sister, or as it was referred to in other accounts as the other sister, who was a prominent suffragist, pacifist, and organiser of women's trade unions in Manchester at the turn of the last century. Eva Gore Booth's campaigns in support of, for example, pit brow workers, barmaids, or women's circus performers as part of her trade union activism manifested her radical conception of gender equality. Despite her own very delicate health, Eva Gore Booth went so far as to work as a pit brow lass herself in order to prove that there was no physical limitation to women's work. When I was speaking to the TUC, I also pointed out that she had to struggle while they were both paying, both sides were paying the trade union levy. Women textile workers were, in fact, not treated equally within the trade union movement with male textile workers. But both Eva Gore Booth and her lifelong partner, Esther Roper, were pioneering not just in their opposition to any kind of discrimination based on gender in the workplace. They were also, in their view, of gender performance as simply learned behaviour and convention. In 1911, both of them joined Thomas Batty's Ethnic Union, which claimed that, upon the fact of sex, there has been built up a gigantic superstructure of artificial convention which urgently needs to be swept away. And together with the members of the Ethnic Union, they established the journal Urania, in which one can find articulated the view that sex was an accident and formed no essential part of an individual's nature. So yes, a century ago, the goal of Urania was to highlight how individuals could achieve their full potential if the constraints of gender were removed. The journal usually opened with an editorial commentary and comprised a letter section, book reviews, the usual, progress reports on co-educational schools, and various reprinted articles from worldwide newspapers relating in particular to cross-dressers and individuals who transgress gender roles. Most issues also contained a Stardust section, which recorded details of women who achieved success in areas usually associated with men. One such article listed under the category Athletics related the case of a 19-year-old Japanese girl who, having woken up to discover a burglar in her room, managed to throw him to the ground and overwhelm him. The girl was a student of jiu-jitsu. Contributors to the journal were also unusual in their rejection of the institution of marriage, which few feminists contested in the early 20th century. Articles thus challenged the notion that all women aspire to be married and that only those who are undesirable remain unmarried. Interestingly, and I believe it is an important contextual point, and this is the point that I found was writing this morning that struck me. It is an important contextual point that one can trace a connection between the radical gender politics of Eva Gore Booth and her friends and the unorthodox forms of spirituality in which they were interested. Many radical feminist thinkers of the time, and also members from Eva Gore Booth's Celtic Revival Literary Circle, thus became members of the Theosophical Society, whose basic principles derived from Eastern religions, such as reincarnation and the law of karma, defined gender and sexuality as fundamentally fluid. A soul, they argued, would not remain the same sex throughout multiple incarnations. There is, however, in these writings also an important consideration, which I think is very important, of the fullness of nature, of a spirituality that fitted easily with the Romantic movement, of the value of intimacy, of friendship, of the solidarity, of shared perspective, of the bonds of commitment to a shared aesthetic of emancipation. In 1913, Eva Booth and Esther Roper moved from Manchester to 33 Fitzroy Square in London's Bloomsbury neighbourhood. The lower floors of their house harboured Roger Fry's Omega workshop, and the two women soon began to mix with the so-called Bloomsbury group, people such as John Maynard Keynes, Virginia Woolf Lytton Strachey, Vanessa Bell, who were challenging accepted views not just on economy, but on sexuality and patriotism, who were celebrating life in all its diversity and possibilities. Of all of these, and I think it was very, very important, is that we mustn't look back at all I have been speaking about through the prism of a highly sexualized version of history, even in terms of the work of our own independence, but rather through the prism of extraordinary friendships and the neglected category in social theory and studies of the importance of intimacy that is much wider and a wider category, and about which all of these writers were writing. May I conclude, and thank you for your patience in putting up with me reflecting like this, but mar focail squared con crica carlish and made the Torah own. May I make an invitation to all dear friends that it is very much worth revisiting the writings of these inspirational figures, such as Eva Booth and Esther Roper, not just as a source of courage in continuing to challenge relentlessly the unquestioned assumptions that still largely underpin the way our society conceives of gender, gender identity, gender expression, and cultural freedom, by drawing both on this rich well from our past and on the courageous and passionate activism that all of you present in this room represent. We must bring to the cause of transgender equality. We can together build a hospitable Ireland in which all citizens are enabled to flourish and encounter happiness and to love.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to start